was wondering.
No, you've got a cat.
Right, but that's not.
Just saying.
Well, I think, I don't know what they do because, no, in some ways, because I think I've got a lecture
If I don't carry
Tuesday, late Tuesday afternoon that talks about preparing for board exposure and sampling and conferences and groups and other things to focus on. Pretty much those things to focus on. Questions about how to hear it, things like that. Who told you?
It was like some pretty solid board review. Is that false?
Don't ever take information like that. These boards, where they pull the questions from, how many they pull, it varies from year to year, from test to test. And that's, in some ways, that's part of the problem. I mean, what you have to do, and that lecture I give, the thing that you have to focus on the most, that you've been focusing on the most, probably since last summer, is what you don't know. That's how you prepare for an examination. The things that you really know, you've got to be honest with yourself. Those are things that, if you had to do let's say an hour or two review, you would come back. But the things that you don't know are the things on the examination that will hit you in the back of the head. Okay? It's the same thing as boards. Feel fortunate that you're not taking the new board they're creating. I think the class behind you is going to have to take the combined board.
Everyone told them that it would be easier. I feel like they were trying to do better.
Who told you?
The G1 said that they were told like, oh, it'll be easier for you guys. Don't worry.
The ADA has this philosophy, has had this philosophy that because boards in the past, everybody seemed to be able to be on that curve in the middle, okay? And a large percentage of passing boards, that they had to increase the spread to make it legitimate. So the first thing they did is with the board you will take, there are multiple choice answers, okay? So instead of A, B, C, D, E, you may have the correct answers to a specific question may be A, it may be G, it may be D, and you have to have all those answers to get it totally correct. Now, I understand the philosophy of trying to make it more clinically related, but I mean, you're basically what you're doing is you're turning the mental board into a bar examination counting test, where these people at the end of their tenure in college have to go and become board certified. They have to be, basically go through everything they learned up through 2, 3, 4 years. Okay? The thing I have about that is, okay, you as a general practitioner, you don't have to be board certified. Okay? You just have to take the knowledge you learn, expand on it. That's what 60 is about. Go forward in your professional life, which may be 30 or 40 years. Okay? From the same standpoint, okay, if you're going into a subspecialty area, at some point in time, you're going to have to take a board exam which focuses on that, concentrates on that aspect, including an oral examination, typically. So I don't understand the purpose. I think that dental students more, we had this discussion yesterday, we talked about the difference between dental education and medical education. You've got a lot more going on in 4 years of your medical colleagues. They don't really get stressed until they go into their employees. You get stressed when you're not involved in the field. So don't look for shortcuts to study for boards. Just the primary thing I say and others say is know what you don't know. Know what you don't know and focus on those areas so that you turn those from weaknesses into knowledge. And there are a lot of things you need. There's a lot of text. And and things associated with that. Yeah, but don't, you know, if it was that easy, everybody would do it, you know? All right, that sounds good. All right, the sensations of smell and taste. Okay, so take a deep breath. See what odors you can detect in your environment.
It smelled really weird. The
Something was
trees
not
on the
right.
side today, right? It smelled like.
You know, when I walk in these buildings, there's always something that says it's not right.
It smelled like fart this morning.
It was
Like
terrible.
It could have been we were following.
I felt embarrassed because I walked
Or,
in.
I haven't seen the geese in a while, I don't know if they got a deal and they said, hey, we're gonna take over this new lake, stay there, you know, instead of.
It is rough, it is real rough.
I walked in and was like, oh.
I gotta be careful what I say, because we're gonna record all of the first year for hard enough, record all of the lectures. Are we?
There's, yeah. Yeah, because you can.
I mean, there's some
I don't
big
know
brothers
that-
watching this.
Yeah, I don't know if that camera has like memory in it probably, because I know you can press something on there so that we can see ourselves. And see it.
Right,
I don't understand
this is
why
how,
that would
you know,
ever
this
be
is,
useful.
there's a crime.
Maybe press that. Push live.
Okay, let's look at this. All right, so this is something that we saw in head and neck. And basically, the area that we're looking at here is in this area of the two upper cavities, the nasal cavity and the oral cavity. Now, what's interesting about these receptors, both in the nasal cavity and the oral cavity, because here we see these are the olfactory receptors. Okay, is that, where did we see, where in your past curriculum, where did you see, or where did we talk about chemoreceptors? Remember? We talked about it in head and neck, okay? We talked about it in heart and lung, okay? They were receptors that picked up changes in really in relationship to pH of the blood, okay? These two special sensations are chemoreceptors, okay? And there's certain things that have to be with the chemoreception. For one, they have to be, whether it's an odor and whether it's a taste, and it has to be dissolved in a liquid, okay? In the nasal cavity, it's mucus, okay? In the oral cavity, it's saliva. So in order to be able to smell or taste, those odorants or those tastings have to be in solution. So these numbers are things that always amaze me, okay? You know, who counted the 50 million bipolar receptors that are associated with the sense of smell? These are, you know, when we talk about neurons, typically this is the only place in a mammal where you see bipolar receptors, okay, is these olfactory neurons, okay? Now these are the olfactory neurons, okay? What we saw when we looked at the bottom of the brain and we saw the olfactory bulb and the olfactory tract, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, those were not the olfactory receptors. Those were not the olfactory nerves. These are, okay? These nerves that are in the mucosa associated with picking up on these odors. So it's about a surface area of 5 to 10 square centimeters, okay, in humans. Once again, odors need to be in solution in order to be detected. Mucosal glands provide aqueous media for this process. These are typically called Bowman's glands. The odors are receptor specific, okay? Where did we talk about that before? We were talking about general sensation. General sensory receptors are sensory stimuli specific, okay? You know, and you know, it seems interesting. I mean, I don't know if we come across 50 million separate odorants in our environment, but we do come across a lot. Okay? And some of them are things we recognize, and some things we may learn at our first encounter with them, and then they go into a system of recognition, a system of memory. So they turn over with the aid of a basal cell, which is a supporting cell. Really different kinds. With these basal cells, they turn over every 4 to 8 weeks, so every month or two, the basal receptors turn over. And you may notice it yourself when things like this are happening that for whatever reason you don't smell things as much, okay, because the receptors are in the process of turning over where so to speak, the used or the older receptors are being turned over. These supporting cells, or sesquinaculars, a fancy name for supporting cells, they commingle with the sensory receptors and play an important role, similar to what glia does in the CNS. Glia is a supporting cell for neurons. Okay. The Bowman's glands are the secretory gland, and their fluid contains the fluid contains what's called an odorant binding protein, which allows the odorant to then be bound to the dendritic portion of the bipolar olfactory cell. Okay. Now, you think about that, and it's not much different, just general sensation, things like that. For example, let's say a motor neuron or a neuron has a process at the end, in what we call its Buckman's bouton. And in order for that bouton to release its neurotransmitter, it has to bind, or it has to be bound by some type of a binding protein to the vesicles to get the vesicles to migrate to the terminus. Yes, ma'am.
So when these chemical compounds come into the medium, in this case mucus, do those cells endocytose those compounds into their dendritic processes, or do they just catch them as they brush up against?
In many ways, that's what they do.
So they're pulling it into, and then you
And then you get a response. We'll see that in that. We've got a schematic that shows. All right, so here's kind of an overview of what we see here. We see these receptors here. These are all bipolar cells. And here we see, this is the dendritic portion.
When you say all bipolar cells, do you mean the basal cells and the developing receptor cells?
Just the receptor cell, just the olfactory neuron.
Just the receptor cells.
And up here, these are the axons. And the axons are passing through bone. What's that portion of bone that they're passing? What are the axons of these neurons passing? The synapse in another area. What is that? Peripheral plane. Okay. So the basal cells are here. This is a supporting cell that is helping in the turnover of these neurons. Here is a mucosal gland called a Bowman's cell, or Bowman's gland, and these are what are producing the mucus. Now down here, the dendrites are basically, where's the mucus? The mucus is on the surface of the epithelium, okay? So this is where the odorants are becoming bound to the olfactory neuron on dendritic process. So if you look at this from the standpoint of neurochemistry of this situation, the odorants dissolve in mucus, covered epithelium, okay? The mucus is produced by the Bowman cells. And this mucus secreted by the Bowman cell contains this odor binding protein. We'll look at an example of this in a second. And they bind to the cilia of the olfactory receptors. The cilia are the projections off of the surface of the dendritic process. Okay. So the odorants bind to the ciliary process. Then there is kind of a second messenger system that furthers this process. There's this G protein, interesting name for it, it's golf factor. I don't know where that came from. I don't know if the scientist at the time was a golfer or whatever, but they call it a golf factor. Activates an adenine cyclase type of process that forms cyclic AMP and binds the specific cation channels of the olfactory nerve and sodium. So then you've got an activation of sodium calcium channels, okay? Remember, you see a lot of this in relationship to certain cell forms in the body, okay? In particular, if you remember in cardiac muscle cells, that sodium actually is first to enter into a contractile cell, but as it enters, that kind of opens a passageway for calcium to fall. So this is one of those things, okay? Now, what's interesting here is that this activates internal chloride channels, okay? And the odorant has to be high enough concentration so in order to create a stimulus, okay? So once again, in relationship to sensory stimuli to begin with, you have to have an adequate stimulus for the nervous system to pick up what the stimuli is. Yes.
Sorry, I have a question. So if the bone cells or glands release the mucus, right, with the body will get sense smell, what happens when we are ingested that we cannot smell but we have a lot of mucus?
It's a problem, isn't it?
Yes.
Especially if you live in highly industrialized communities where your mucous membranes are inflamed all the time. One of the problems is that most of these receptors in the upper portion of the nasal cavity. So if you get something like if you get something like a rhinitis where you get inflammation, it is harder for the air to rise up into the receptor cells. Okay, and why is that? Well, because the tissues are inflamed, so one of the things of inflammation is they swell. Tissues swell. Okay? Remember that in this area there are very finite, thin arterial blood vessels that are bringing blood to this region from the core of the body, so that blood is very warm, so it warms the air. So it helps if there's something that is coming in here in relationship to a receptor that is basically coming in through the air. It helps it to rise up towards the receptors, okay, from that standpoint. But from the same standpoint, it provides humidification for the tissues themselves, which is important because these are tissues, the nasal cavity, the oral cavity, that are chronically exposed to the external environment. So there is a greater opportunity for them to become dried out. So swollen or extremely dry is not a good thing in relationship to picking up sensory reception here in relationship either to, we'll see, taste as well, but in relationship to smell. So here's kind of an overview of one of those receptors. Okay, so you see down here on the bottom over on your right, you see this kind of blow up of this cilia on the dendritic processes of the olfactory neuron. We see the axon coming from the cell body over here, the olfactory receptor cell. But we see kind of a blow up of this process as the odorants are dissolved in mucus. They are then bound to a G protein, a second messenger type system channel, causing the release of adenine cyclase, causes energy to be used to open calcium and sodium channels. Okay. Now, when the calcium and sodium flow inside of the receptor cilia, that sets off a reaction that causes chlorine ion to move out of the cell. So that actually is kind of a potentiation type effect on this process to lead to stimulation or depolarization of this cilia's membrane. It's not so much in this case sodium calcium influx, but that's important. But what's important is that chlorine ion efflux that is going to enhance the membrane depolarization in these ciliary processes. And they say there are seven types of odorants in general that an individual can smell. Camphoraceous, you may get some of that if you're still using oxide butane on the left, or for temporization, you even know what it is.
We talked about it.
Yeah, Dr. Resnick talks
Essential,
about it.
dentist, no.
Dr. Resnick is a good practicing dentist. Okay.
Oh, my gosh, awesome.
Musky odors, like you got too much humidity in the air, and it's creating more floral flowers. Okay. Someone was telling me that when we were sitting down with all of your clinical colleagues, that the Warner College wanted to have flowers on the tables now.
Just like fresh flowers.
Somebody told me. So I said, okay, all right, so floral, obviously they are more outdoors. Pepperminty, okay, peppermint is actually an odorant in relationship to this thing. Ethereal, have any of you ever spent time at all in an operating theater? They don't use ether too much anymore, but it has a very, very pungent smell, so to speak, in relationship to its odor. Don't stay too close to it too long, otherwise you'll be asleep. But they don't use ether as much as they use it, but they do use it. They do use it. I understand it's a good cleaning agent. Okay. Pungent odors are very powerful odors, but they're not usually very pleasant odors. And that should be P-U-T-R-I-D. Putrid odors are things basically stale waste products, possibly human waste, possibly stale eggs, things like that.
They will be camphoraceous.
Camphoraceous, camphor is an entity, I forget where it comes directly from, but certain chemicals like zinc oxide has a very camphoraceous type of smell. Okay, it's very noticeable. Usually, when I was in dentistry, if you walk into a dentist office, if you were a dentist, you walk in that office and you would smell zinc oxide butane, you would know exactly what that was. But the patient would recognize that this is a dental office, and that odor was common to the dental office. All right, so then these axon processes go up to this structure up here, the olfactory bulb, and these dendritic processes now are passing through the cruciform plate now, and they are synapsing in a structure that is referred to as a olfactory glomerulus. Okay. They say that in an olfactory bulb there's about 2,000 of these. And there are specific odorants that go to specific olfactory glomeruli within the olfactory bulb. And these are going to synapse with another group of cells that we'll look at in a minute called mitral or tufted cells, which are basically going to take the information from the olfactory bulb into the olfactory tract, into really firsthand into the cerebral cortex. Remember, smell is one of those odorants that doesn't directly go back to the thalamus and then gets relayed to the cortex. It goes directly back to the area of the cortex. In some ways that tells you, we kind of ignore smell in humans because we don't have this finite ability to smell things. As for example, when I take my dog out in the morning, he's got his nose up in the air, he says, okay, let's see what's going on, something like that. Or if the window's open, he picks up an odor through coming in through the window, and sometimes he gets excited, he starts barking, whether it's another dog walking outside or whether it's something else. So a dog has a olfactory surface that's 100 times ours. Okay. because of their long snout. Okay, but we do not typically have that acute a sense of smell. Okay, especially if you're in the napping lab for 40 years actually. Actually, it's getting closer to 50 years. Okay, so these odorants are things that are picked up and relayed, and specific odorants are typically relayed to specific glomeruli.
Did you say the smell is the only sense that goes there for the
Yes. Okay, so, all right, we've been here before. Okay, so here we see there's the olfactory bulb sitting on top of the cruciform plate. And this is the beginning of the olfactory tract. Now, why don't we see the rest of the olfactory tract? Where is that? Remember when we took the brains out? These olfactory bulbs and tracts usually stayed adhered to this anterior surface of the cerebral cortex. Okay, so we don't have this. This has already received the olfactory neurons through the cruciform plate. These are the secondary pathways back to the brain. So we're not going to see them here with the brain removed. Okay. All right, so these are non-myelinated receptors. Aberrant neurons that are passing through the plate, these axons of these olfactory neurons. They synapse on the olfactory glomeruli, and they are, at that point, they also are being excitatory to either microcells or puppet cells in the olfactory bulb. So this union, or the synaptic site of the olfactory axonal processes and the dendritic processes of microcells and puppet cells are at these points that are very well isolated and called the olfactory glomerulus. Okay? Why do they call it glomerulus? Well, in Bowman's capsule we had this, in the kidneys we had this tuft of cells surrounded by a capsule. Okay? In the cerebellum, we had these cerebellar rosettes from the infracells. Remember, all of the input comes in via two pathways. One is a very small pathway called the olivary cerebellar pathway of the flattening fiber. But most of the sensations in relationship to movement that pass to the cerebellum are with cells that are called muscle fibers. And they had a little flower-like structure on the top that was surrounded by a group of cells called granule cells. So they call that a glomerulus. So where we have unions where there's some type of engagement between different cell forms and they're somewhat isolated to very specific areas, they call that a glomerulus. So here we have the axonal processes of these bipolar olfactory neurons engaging at the glomeruli with microcells and puppet cells. There's also some other cells in the glomerulus. It's called paraglomerulus. So they receive both, as I say, where they come up with these numbers sometimes it's kind of amazes me, but they say there are on average 2,000 glomeruli in an olfactory bulb. Do we have 2,000 different odorants that we are familiar with in our environment? Probably not familiar with, but there may be 2,000 odorants that we, coming in contact with, would recognize it as some type of an odor, not necessarily knowing what it is. Okay, so the microcells and the puppet cells, and there is a more peripheral cell in between glomeruli that are called paraglomerular cells. Okay? The neurotransmitter here is glutamate or aspartate. Remember the other place is indicate as an active excitatory neurotransmitter, is in the cerebellum with climbing fibers. Okay? So these areas that are between the glomeruli are called paraglomerular cells. Now, one of the things we were just talking about this also, we don't get into any other special sensation in this neuro course other than the senses of smell and taste, but things like vision and hearing and so forth. Especially in vision, there are cells that are called amacrine cells or horizontal cells or things like that, and they create a process called lateral inhibition, which causes a more finite sensation or stimuli to be sent into the central nervous system. So what it kind of does is it shuts off the less active sensory regions. So in that case, it would be things associated with the optic nerves, okay? In this case, it's associated with glomeruli. So the paraglomerular cells, and we'll see this in an image, between the glomeruli are doing this process of lateral inhibition where they are shutting down less active odorant interaction at glomeruli so that the organism can focus in on these odorants, and more specifically what the odorant is, or in all honesty, also where it's coming from. So here we see, here's the olfactory neuron. And here, these are its axons. And here are the glomeruli here. And here are the mitral cells and the tufted cells. So here's a tufted cell, here's a mitral cell. Mitral has to do with the shape of its nucleus, okay, or its cell body. And so it looks more like a miter shape, or and some people will say that the hats of priests were more miter. Okay, tufted, it's basically just a little expansion of the neurons. It doesn't have necessarily a constant shape, but there's a little shape here at the nucleus, okay, with the tufted cell, mitral cell. And here's a paraglomerular cell. So these are associated with lateral inhibition. So what we're trying to do is make the odorant more finite to the organs, so it has a better chance of knowing what it is. Remember, there's some odorants that come into our environment that may imply to us an odorant that is dangerous to our health. Okay? But from the same standpoint, it could be a noxious odorant. Now, it's interesting. A noxious odorant isn't necessarily something that we don't recognize from the standpoint of an odor. For example, chlorine gas. Okay? But in smelling chlorine gas, fluorine will get into the mucosal surface, go into an aqueous situation, and form hydrochloric acid. And that hydrochloric acid is a tissue damaging agent. So that's, remember, noxious things are things that cause tissue damage. Okay? Pain is a noxious thing. When you smell noxious things, many times they are painful. Odors can be painful as well. All right, now we get up here and we see that there's another group of cells that are engaging both mitral cells, and they also engage tufted cells here, and these are granule cells. And these are a second layer of cells that are performing this function of lateral inhibition. They're trying to make the odorant more specific. Okay, they're trying to reduce extraneous odors that focus in on an odorant that is coming in from in a very high concentration, so to speak. So that high concentration odorant is going to take a precedent over, let's say, lesser odorants in our environment. So the granule cells also participate in lateral inhibition, but what they do is they reduce weak stimulated mitral and tufted cells, okay? They reduce the sensations coming from weaker stimulated mitral tufted cells. So we already have 2 layers of lateral inhibition before this sensation now is going to go back here to the olfactory cortex, and what we're going to talk about in a minute, the olfactory tracts.
So the granule cells reduce the weakened stimuli, and what is it that the periglomerular cells do?
The same thing, but they do it at a different level. The periglomerular cell, peri meaning adjacent to the glomerulus, okay? They are reducing weakly stimulated odorant activity at a glomerulus, okay? But then that whatever odorant activity continues now more from the bulb to the tract is being carried in mitral cells or tufted cells. The granule cells then do a lateral inhibitory effect on the mitral cells or the tufted cells. And once again, what we're trying to do is the organism is trying to get a focus, a more focus on what this odor is and where it's coming from. So this kind of says that. So what we have here is that the glomerular regions which are stimulated inhibit those which are not through the influence of the periglomerular. Sometimes it's also, instead of periglomerular, they call it juxtaglomerular cells, which mediate contacts between glomeruli. Okay? Granule cells have an inhibitory effect on non-activated or less highly activated mitral or tufted cells. Both of them do this. Okay, what's the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter in the central nervous system? GABA-aminobutyric acid. So when you're trying to shut something off, typically in the central nervous system, you use GABA-aminobutyric acid. Okay. What about in the spinal cord? I'm helping you now because these questions may appear very soon. Okay. What's the inhibitory neurotransmitter in the spinal cord? Glycine. Glycine. So this improves sensory sensitivity, okay, through this lateral inhibition, okay? So, as I mentioned, similar to amacrine cells or horizontal cells within the confines of the retina of the eye.
I think GABA was the primary inhibitory in the central nervous system? Okay.
GABA.
Yeah.
And then what about
Well, remember,
the
spinal cord is also central nervous system, but now we're talking about the highest centers of the central nervous system, called the cortex, cerebellum, okay, those areas, thalamus, basal nuclei, okay, areas like that. But we don't typically see glycine used as an inhibitory neurotransmitter in those regions. What we see glycine used the most is in the reaction, in particular relationship to motor neuron stimulation in areas of the gray matter of the spinal cord, primarily the anterior. Okay, now we have another type of thing that falls into a type of odorant type of reaction, but it has a little bit different, it has a little bit of a different type of pathway, and it also has a different type of an effect. But it's usually thrown into this discussion when you talk about receptors in the nasal cavity region. These are called pheromones. Okay. So pheromones are responding to chemicals released by the body or by other organisms. Okay. Okay, so what do we do? What do we do in the morning? We go take a shower, we wash ourselves down with some soaps more odorant than not. okay, sometimes, okay, we get out of there, before we get out of there, we slosh on cologne or perfume, you know. This, what are we doing? What are we trying to do? We're trying to be more acceptable in the environment that we are entering, okay? For whatever reason. For whatever reason. But just body odors themselves, things that are associated with the release of certain odorant entities in regards to things like your armpits, or in relationship to be very honest with you, during periods of time in regards to, for example, menstrual periods in females, okay, or high excitatory times in relationship to sexual activity, both in males and females. There are certain types of body odorants that are released that fall into this category, that are picked up by whoever is in the environment. Next. So these are actually located on this area. If you remember, in head and neck, we talked about the nasal septum, and there are three hard tissue structures that come together. The nasal septum cartilage meets this upper entity referred to as the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid bone, and the lower entity referred to as the bone. So at that point where they meet, there seem to be these pheromonal receptors that lie in the epithelium of that specific region of the nose. Okay? That may have a greater effect sometimes than odorants, because it is an area that's lower in the nasal cavity and more easily contacted by these pheromonal type entities. So this is things like, you know what your environment smells like. You know the odorants, or you know the things that you sense when you're in your environment. Okay? So territory mapping, okay? Territory mapping. That's when my dog goes out in the morning and take him out to pee or poop or whatever. He's doing a lot of territory mapping. If he doesn't, he'll go up, he'll lift his leg, he'll pee on a tree. That's my tree. That's my tree. Okay? I know that because I peed on it, and I know what my feet smells like. Okay? So these are territory mapping. Reproductive behaviors. Okay? Just identity of an organism is familiar to you. Okay? But they can also induce aggressive behaviors or submissive behaviors. Okay? Aggressive behaviors or submissive behaviors. In other words, this person that just entered your environment, there are things that you detect in relationship to that you do not like about this other organism, and you may have to come to battle with this organism to get them out of your territory. Okay. So they seem to be more closely related, though, to noxious sensory pathways associated with the maxillary portion of the trigeminal nerves. Okay? I want you to think about that. Okay, one of the things that we throw so much out at you at a given point in time. When I hear my colleagues sometimes they talk about a case that came in, always talk to your patient about why they're here. Okay? Some of them will say, all of a sudden I'm just certain things that I'm around that I smell really either make me sick or they're I don't know what, it stimulates me either in a good way or a bad way. Okay? That's actually maxillary division of trigeminal nerve. So there's more than just general sensation in there. Because pheromonal sensation probably more likely falls under a special sense as opposed to a general sensation. So, menstrual secreting. Sometimes I think they say it's a little bit embarrassing, but were any of you in sororities in college? Okay. Did you notice when you were did you live in the house? Did you live in a sorority house? Okay. Now, sometimes when groups of women congregate together constantly, they essentially go through menses at the same time. Think about that. So, just because of the fact that these certain odorants are given off during this period of time associated with the menstrual cycle. Okay, so I drew this little dot. Okay, so that's the oronasal organ right there. That's where those tissues are, where these nasal septal cartilage is meeting the epithelial surfaces of the perpendicular plane of the ethmoid bone and the bone. Okay. So that's where they will leave these sperm and receptors. All right, so let's now take it a little bit further down. Okay. So now the dendritic processes have picked up these odorants from the glomeruli. They are going to either be inhibited at the glomeruli from going any further, or inhibited by granule cells that feel that some of the microcells or ducted cells are not highly stimulated and going to be shut off. And they're going to coalesce into a pathway that comes from the olfactory bulb and travels down this cord of tissue, going back to the cerebral cortex. And that cord of tissue is called the olfactory stride, the olfactory tract. So there are two bundles of micro-tufted cell processes. There's a more lateral bundle, and there's a more medial bundle. The medial bundle, in some ways, is the more simplistic aspect. It's not that it doesn't have any direct effect in the cerebral cortex, but most of the function of the medial bundle or the medial striate is to take information from one side of the olfactory system to the other. So basically, this is a pathway that helps the organism recognize not necessarily what the odorant is, but where it's coming from. And that seems kind of, it's kind of an interesting thing when you think about how close the left and right nasal cavities are to each other. But it's important enough that the organ are selective enough that the organism can tell whether the odorant is coming more from over here from their right, or more from over in this area from the left. And this little crossover point is a commissure. That's the anterior commissure. The largest commissure, remember once again, is the corpus callosum. This is the second largest, the anterior commissure, which kind of sits down there in front of this association pathway called the pharynx. So the lateral striate is a little bit more complex. So lateral striate is going to travel to an area anterior to the anterior perforated substance. Now this is an area that is sitting on the anterior surface of the brain. It is sitting actually just behind the anterior commissure. It is perforated by tiny little blood vessels that are coming into these ventricles of the brain that are called choroidal vessels, anterior choroidal vessels. So the surface is perforated, okay? So this is called the anterior perforated substance. Now, there's a region in there that is more defined, which is called the tubercle, which sits in a space where the lateral stria will go out laterally to lateral cortical areas, and the medial stria will go medially to other areas that it will sit in front of the primary olfactory cortex. So they say that is a triangular shape or trigon. Okay? The tubercle sits in the trigon. And the tubercle will also receive information from the medial olfactory stria. So the lateral and medial olfactory stria will send information to the olfactory tubercle in the olfactory cortex that is coming from both medial and lateral stria. So these go to an area. This is an area referred to in the temporal cortex. This is called Brodmann's area 34. Okay, don't worry about that too much. And a structure that's called the amygdaloid nucleus, which the amygdaloid nucleus, do you remember what it was? I know we went through basal nuclei and musculoskeletal, but the amygdaloid nucleus at some point in time, years ago, was considered to be part of the basal nuclei. It was considered to be And why was that? Because it was attached to what is the amygdaloid nucleus attached to the confines of the cerebral cortex, primarily the temporal lobe. Remember? It's attached to the tail of the caudate nucleus. Okay? So why this came into play is that the amygdaloid nucleus seems to be not more basonuclear, but more emotional cortex, the limbic system. Okay? It has to do with information that is associated now with the emotional aspects of sound. Okay? So let's say we get these odorants in and it's really something that we don't like and we really start to get agitated by it, or combined with pheromonal input that says, oh, we certainly want to move towards that odorant because it seems to be a more excitatory odorant to us. You know, we're trying to find out where it is and what it is. You know, it's kind of like, you know, Thanksgiving coming up, you know, finding your mother's kitchen. But the amygdaloid nucleus is associated with emotional aspects of smell. And this sits in an area adjacent to what we call the primary olfactory cortex. And this is an area, I see the name, just kind of roll over. This primary olfactory cortex, actually the area of the tubercle, will then send information, afferent information, from the tubercle to a nucleus of the thalamus. Okay, so not going to thalamus first, going to thalamus secondary. And this is called the dorsal medial nucleus. So from the tubercle to the dorsal medial nucleus. And this, once again, this has to do with information that amygdaloid nucleus emotionally or stimulated aspects of odorants, but also with trying to now coalesce the odorants with other sensations that we are getting at the same time. So this travels, these things that travel here to the frontal lobe are for the discrimination of what the odorant is. Okay. Amygdaloid nucleus, olfactory tubercle, okay? Then they send the information a little bit farther back to an area that is called the entorhinal cortical region, or Brodmann's area 28. Now, this is in the temporal lobe. This is in the anterior temporal lobe, adjacent to this part of this region I just spoke about a couple times called the hippocampus. And in front of the hippocampus, well, first of all, there is a parahippocampal gyrus coming from the cingulate cortex, the neocortex, into this area of the limbic cortex, the emotional cortex, and travels all the way to the front of the hippocampus, and it has on the front of there, it looks like a little hook. So they call it the uncus. They call it the uncus. And the entorhinal cortex is immediately adjacent to the uncus of this temporal lobe region. Okay. So that is, once again, it's anterior to the portion of the parahippocampal gyrus, which is taking information from neocortex to limbic cortex. But once again, I've mentioned this several times, what is the hippocampus primary responsibility? What's going on? Memory, short, immediate memory. Things that we are seeing at a given point in time. Once again, not becoming long-term memory until maybe 10 years down the road. So that can happen with an odor. You know, when you talk about things like territory mapping, here's an organism that was taken out of its environment, its initial environment, and wasn't brought back there for 10 years. Okay? But at that point, 10 years down the line, just put back in that environment, it senses those odorants and knows exactly where it is. So that short-term memory, now that it's stored, is actually coming out as a memory that's helping the organism recognize where it is at this 10-year point in time. Okay? It's bringing back odorants that you would expect to have not come in contact, let's say, with tanks. So they can't reach.
So what is the uncus?
The uncus means hook. Okay, it means hook. In the front of the parahippocampal gyrus, you'll see this in a second. The front of the parahippocampal gyrus, it has a little curve. It's just like the pterygoid annulus. Annulus also means hook. Okay? So, you know, think about it as being the annulus of the hippocampus, or the hippocampal gyrus. Once again, the medial striatum is a little bit more direct. It goes, there is a nuclear area just below or just behind the olfactory bulb, which is called the anterior olfactory nucleus. This is really where information that is going to cross from the medial olfactory striatum, not all information, but some of it, is going to synapse and be carried across from left to right or right to left to the opposite olfactory neuron glomerulus, having an effect once again on this process of lateral inhibition, trying to get the organism to realize where in their environment this odor is coming from. Okay? In other words, shutting down the weaker cells there that really do not give you that idea, and trying to focus in on where that odor is coming from the standpoint of this, the area of their environment. Travels across by the anterior commissure. This will synapse on granule cells in the opposing olfactory bulb, which will once again shut off the weaker stimulating microrepugnant cells. All right, now there's an area here that can be seen, sometimes seen in the gross vein under augmentation. And this is posterior to the anterior perforated substances. There is the royal vessel come through. And this is like a, it's just above the olfactory tract. It's called the diagonal band of Broca. It's a small, short pathway that goes behind the olfactory tube. Okay, so here we see, here's olfactory bulb. Here is, this is the lateral olfactory stria. Over here, here is this anterior nucleus. Here is the medial olfactory stria. This is going to cross here. This is the anterior commissure. Okay. So here is this region here that is referred to as the anterior perforated substance. So sitting in here at this point is the olfactory tubercle. And here is this diagonal band of Broca here. Okay, here's the amygdala, or the amygdaloid nucleus. Okay. This area here, kind of see where it comes around like a hook under this area here. Okay, this is this entorhinal region.
Is the olfactory tubercle like that whole?
Just this here, no, just the thing in the center. Just this here. It's within the confines of the olfactory cortex. Okay? It's within the confines. That little red dot is deep to that surface. Okay? We'll see it on a different slide. Got it. Different slide that shows it as well. This area here, okay, here and here, this is coming under or adjacent to the entorhinal cortex. This is the uncus. So this is the front of this area here. This is the parahippocampal gyrus coming down to the area of the hippocampus. Okay.
What is that?
Which one? Amygdaloid, AM. Okay, so let's look at a couple of other representations of this. Okay, kind of the same thing, showing the blue, the lateral stria, going to the amygdaloid nucleus, going to this entorhinal cortex, which has a pear shape to it, so it's something called the piriform cortex, and to this entorhinal region just behind it. Okay, so here's entorhinal back here. This whole area here has somewhat of a pear shape to it, so it's referred to as the piriform cortex. The amygdala is up here. Okay, so then the olfactory tubercle is in here between the medial and lateral stria, deep, or I should say superficial, to the olfactory nerves.
What was the other name for the piriform cortex?
Entorhinal cortex, okay, and piriform cortex are somewhat overlapped. So here's a sort of color-coded region. Okay, and this obviously is blue. Okay. This, there's the amygdala. This is this area of the trigone, lateral stria, medial stria, olfactory tubercle in here. And here I've got it in green. There's the olfactory tubercle. And here is this piriform and amygdaloid region and entorhinal region here. And then the information that comes from the tubercle to the dorsal medial nucleus of the thalamus, then comes back and gets stored here in this orbital frontal region. This is the olfactory cortical association. This is olfactory association. That's where the memories are stored. Okay, and then some other relationships here. The olfactory cortex is paleocortex. It's not archicortex, which is kind of interesting to me, because I think the sense of smell is probably one of the oldest special senses for an organism. But it is a little bit, it's definitely developed earlier in time than the neocortex. Three layers in here, the piriform, pre-piriform, some authors call it pre-piriform. The olfactory tubercle is within this trigonal area, the split of the olfactory stria. The para-amygdaloid cortex is this area that is adjacent and primarily in the temporal lobe, associated with the amygdaloid nucleus in the entorhinal region, which is immediately adjacent to a little bit more posterior position. So these areas are associated with emotional and motivational aspects of olfaction. Okay, this is where it's processed. This is where it's determined by the organism how it's going to use it. So projections to the entorhinal cortex, the orbital frontal cortex, the piriform cortex for odor and memory, and are first going to the medial dorsal nucleus of the thalamus, and then they're going into this association area of the floor of the prefrontal cortical area. Here's what we see. So here we're going from the tubercle, and we're going to the thalamus, medial dorsal nucleus, and then from the thalamus, we're going to send the information back to the orbital frontal cortex to be stored. This next one kind of gives you some image of the pathways. Here's the amygdaloid. Here is the hippocampus. This is the nose of the hippocampus. That's the uncus over here. So you got to think about this as this is kind of been taken out of context, of this temporal lobe region. So both of these pathways will be found in the confines of the temporal lobe. But immediately adjacent to that, we have the rhinal region.
Which part is
Which part is that?
Lady Road where I guess, but I don't know.
Right there. And the nose of the hippocampus. Here, let me do this. That's the nose. Okay, and then this piriform cortical region right here. The olfactory tubercle is right here. They have a little tinier behind, but that's essentially, these are intercortical pathways. Thalamus, olfactory cortex, thalamus, olfactory cortex. Just again, a schematic, just trying to summarize where these different regions are. Okay, where do these pathways go? Okay. So the olfactory receptors are these bipolar neurons. They go to the olfactory bulb by passing through the cruciform plate. Then from the bulb they go to the olfactory tracts. The anterior olfactory nucleus picks up high up in the olfactory tract. The medial stria takes it to the opposite side. The lateral stria continues on down and goes to these primary olfactory or piriform cortical regions from the nasal thalamus, hypothalamus, amygdaloid, and entorhinal regions, associated both with the emotional cortex and memory storage and so forth. Okay, why don't you take a break here? This is a good lesson. Condition or anosmia. What kind of things contribute to anosmia? A chronic smoke-filled environment, whether it's created by people or by something going on in your environment. So you brought this up, chronic rhinitis. Okay, what if your membranes are chronically inflamed? Your sense of smell is not going to be as acute. Okay, hysteria. Okay, when we get hysteria, after you take a neurons. You may not smell as well after that. What was it talking about? But there is a syndrome where odor receptors, there's an absence of these neurons. Okay? And this was described by Kalman. This is called Kalman syndrome, where there are a developmental absence or a congenital absence of olfactory receptors. Meningiomas, I saw one day we came in a little early, Dr. Landers was talking about meningiomas. Okay? This sometimes Foster-Kennedy syndrome falls into this, and description of meningiomas. I think I've told you, I had a patient that presented one time with problems. She said, she really, all of a sudden, not only does she have some discomfort in her upper jaw, or she's having trouble breathing, she thinks she has sinusitis. Can you take a radiograph and determine that? So we took the radiograph and we saw meningioma growing down from a frontal sinus into her back sinus. Okay, so that wasn't a dental problem. So we referred her to, I referred her to a neurologist, referred her to a neurosurgeon to have that tumor dissected. Okay. She had a lot of other problems beside that, but that certainly was something that, you gotta look, what is that? And not worry that, you had a schedule to do a two-surface CAD/CAM restoration on number 3. You gotta think about the patient. Okay, hyperosmia, a reduction in your ability to smell. Or I'm sorry, a increase in your ability to smell atypically. So pregnancy causes this, menopause causes this, irritation of the nasal mucosa causes this. Anything that would increase the effect of sensory transmission is going to have an effect on making the odor more acute in the individual. Dysosmia, when the sense of smell is basically altered, something's wrong. Okay. As we get older, we lose neurons, we don't get back. Okay. We lose olfactory neurons. Okay. So senility, hallucinations. Okay. Dental school sometimes in students causes a lot of hallucinations, but also alcoholic withdrawal causes atypical smells or odors to be sensitive. Okay. All right, yes.
Is the hyperosmia due to hormone changes? Like
It
in
can be
regards
related
to?
to pheromonal type reaction,
Okay.
okay, as well, because they kind of overlap because we're the organs of the thing.
Okay.
Okay, but, that goes into things like what we're talking about menstrual synchrony. All right, taste sensation. All right, this is another chemoreceptor type sensation, okay? But taste receptors are not neurons. Taste receptors are not neurons. Olfactory receptors are bipolar neurons. Taste receptors are basically modified lingual epithelium or palatal epithelium. So here you remember what this is. This is a mouth. Okay, so the areas where the receptors are going to be located and are down in here, basically anywhere, or possibly up in here in relationship to these receptors. And so you know the cranial nerves that participate, the cranial nerves that receive sensation for taste. That's a good relationship. 7, 9, and 10. Okay. Anterior 2/3 of the tongue, posterior area of the tongue adjacent to the tonsillar region and to the root of the tongue between the epiglottis and the back of the tongue, but also the palate and mucosa. Okay, taste receptors are located within the confines of these morphological shaped entities on the surface of the tongue primarily. They are located on the surface. They're also located in the palate, but they're kind of soft palate, but they're kind of hidden. They are specific basically for 4 entities, but the mixing of substances in relationship to these entities can cause a certain or specific type of taste. So basically sweet, sour, bitter, and salty. They are a chemoreceptor, but they are not neurons. They are modified epithelial cells. From them, they synapse or are associated with a afferent neuron that's going to take the information into nuclear areas inside of the brainstem. What's the nuclear area for taste inside the brainstem. That's called the gustatory nucleus, or it is the superior portion of the solitary nucleus. Now, they turn over a little bit quicker. They turn over every 10 to 14 days. So once again, alteration in taste sensation sometimes, depending upon these periods of time in your oral cavity, where these are turning over, you may, have taste maybe less pleasant for you or less active.
Dr. Landers,
Yeah.
is superior salivatory or just?
Solitary. So the solitary. Salivatory is saliva, it's motor. The solitary nucleus is sensation, visceral sensation. The upper portion is taste from 7, 9, and 10. The lower portion is general visceral and apparent information. Some people throw 7 in here. There's still a lot of discussion about that, but definitely 9 and 10. So they are associated with afferent fibers via the neurotransmitter serotonin. Okay? So these are serotonergic receptors. Facial nerve, remembering, cranial nerve number 7 takes care of the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. Glossopharyngeal cranial nerve 9, the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. The vagus nerve, the root of the tongue, and the facial nerve, also the palate. Okay, so here, once again, we see our friend the facial nerve. Okay, and in association with the lingual branch of the mandibular division. So remember this right here, that's joining the lingual nerve. Okay, that's the chorda tympanic branch. Okay, so that travels within the confines of the lingual. Okay. Also, chorda tympani, what other type of nerve components is it associated with? What else is in there? What's this structure here? What's that? What is it? What's its preceding information? Is it autonomic? What kind of autonomic? Sympathetic or parasympathetic? Parasympathetic. Facial nerve. Okay, so preganglionic chorda tympanic branches, synapse here, and postganglionic fibers get carried usually via the lingual nerve or direct innervation through the ganglion to the more anterior aspect of the oral cavity mucosa. Okay, also to gland here. Okay, doesn't come out very well, but this is the sublingual gland. This is the submandibular. Okay, so what do we use saliva for? What do we use saliva for? Okay, what else?
Medium for the taste perception.
Medium for the taste receptors, and also helps to keep the oral cavity moist. Once again, this is an area that's directly associated with the external environment. If the mouth is dry, whether it's medication related, a lot of antihypertensive medications will also reduce salivary flow and reduce the individual's ability to taste things. Okay. Here is some of the facial nerve fibers are going to coalesce with this nerve here. This is the maxillary, or this is V sub 2. And remember, we have these entities that are associated with this ganglion here via the greater petrosal. Nerve branch, and this is of 7. Okay? And then these fibers are going to come down here and primarily into this junction of the soft and hard palate. Okay? These are descending palatine. So these are coming into the palatal mucosa. Nasopalatine nerves that are branches of the maxillary division aren't associated with any type of taste bud, but the descending palatine, in particular the lesser palatine, are. Here we see glossopharyngeal nerve and the vagus nerve. So this is the glossopharyngeal, cranial nerve 9. Okay, the vagus comes down here, and then it comes up here to the root of the tongue. What branch of the vagus nerve comes to the root of the tongue for sensation, taste sensation, general sensation, possibly general visceral inference sensation? What branch of the vagus nerve does that? Actually comes down to the neck and ascends to the hypopharynx and ascends to the root of the tongue. Which branch is it? Superior laryngeal branch of 10. Glossopharyngeal branch is just called the glossopharyngeal. So that's the root of the tongue. There's taste buds on the front of the epiglottis, and there's taste buds on the mucosa in this, what we call these spaces that are separated by the posterior lingual frame. What's the name given to them? Remember? Follicula. Okay. So these are going into these depressions covered with mucosa called follicula. All right, so what are the taste buds associated with the tongue? Okay. Fungiform papilla. They look like mushrooms. Hence the term fungiform. Okay. Tiny little dots. We'll see this on a tongue. Years ago, some authors called them fungiform, and some call them conical. Okay. About the same size. So I don't know why they used this dualist term, but they didn't have a lot of information to use the term. Foliate. On the posterior lateral borders of the tongue, there are folds. These are called the foliate papilla. Okay. So there's about 1,000 fungiform papilla on the surface of the tongue. There are about only 5 to 6 folds on the surface, the posterior lateral surface of the tongue. It's foliate. Valate are mostly found in the posterior of the tongue. It's like a mushroom surrounded by a moat, okay, by a sulcus. These are very large. There's about 8 to 12, so about 4 on each side of a terminal groove called the sulcus terminalis on the tongue. And at the midpoint where the left and right sulcus terminalis meet, there's typically a little depression or opening. What is that? You remember that? Okay. The foramen cecum. Okay. Back there. What develops from the foramen cecum area of the thyroid? Okay, so I'm sure you can't see this, but fungiform, conical, really, they're equal terms. Filiform are like little hairs, okay? Why didn't I put that where the taste buds, associated with taste buds? Papilliform papilla associated with taste buds? Not at all. They're basically an instrument on the tongue. Tongue, not so much in us, I don't know each and every what your habits are. But definitely in other mammals like dogs and cats, that's a grooming tool. That fungiform ridge creates a brush-like entity on the surface of the tongue. Any of you have cats? Okay? The cat rubs its tongue against your hand. It feels like you're being rubbed with a brush. Actually, the dog too, but not as dense, not as dense as cats. Cats. Okay. Here are the foliate papilla. Over here.
Is that how you spell zebra?
Well, that's the English. That's the British. Okay. You can also see. Okay. These are the fungiform papilla. Here is the.
Right, I thought that one was about.
I'm sorry. Circumvallate. Thank you. Circumvallate. Here is the terminal sulcus or sulcus luminalis in the form and secant is typically right here. Okay. What are all these? They're labeled. Lingual follicles. What are those? That's lymphatic tissue. This lymphatic tissue, remember, there's a ring of tissue in the pharyngeal wall. Okay? So what's alongside of the posterior one-third of the tongue? What lymphoid structure is alongside the posterior third of the tongue? Palatine tonsils. Okay? What lymphoid structure lies in the posterior nasal pharyngeal wall? Adenoid or pharyngeal tonsils. Okay? So there's a ring of tonsillar tissue. That was described by a guy named Walder. That's called Walder's ring. These are questions. These are things that are just thrown out at you because I know that I've seen them as board questions. Okay. All right. So if we look here, we look at this in particular, and this really doesn't hold with today's science. But they felt that most of the sweet receptors were at the tip of the tongue, that salty were just behind it, but on the lateral side of the sweet receptors at the tip of the tongue, that sour was associated mostly with the foliate papilla on the posterior lateral of the tongue, and that bitter was more closely related to the posterior one-third of the tongue, but also up here as well. So, why? Okay, yes, Brian.
But all of these taste buds, they've been grouped into the groups we previously discussed. All taste buds within the same group are the same, yeah?
Right.
What would be different between the so-called sour taste bud versus the sweet?
Well, we'll see that in a minute, because there's different,
Right.
there's specific receptor cells associated with specific taste buds. Most people would say in today's science that they're distributed throughout, that it's just a mixture, and once again, just like in the nasal mucosa, there's a process of lateral inhibition, that certain entities will be more expressed depending upon their concentration. Right? Now, one thing, though, that we know about taste buds, okay, so why these specific things? What is sweetness associated with? Okay, now we're bringing stuff on the outside. We're not breathing air, so to speak, typically. Typically, we breathe air in through our nose and out through our mouth. But what are we bringing in? We're bringing in substances to our oral cavity. It could be a liquid substance. It could be some type of food source or something else that we're bringing in for whatever reason. Okay. So what is sweet? What are sweet entities?
Very short chain carbohydrates.
Carbohydrates.
Sucrose, fructose.
Carbohydrates are an energy source. So if we're looking for entities, and we do this ourselves, and, whether it's down to that candy machine down there in the hall behind your multidiscipline lab, okay? We search out, all other organisms search out, mammalian organisms search out carbohydrates for an energy source, as an energy source, okay? What does salt have to do with it? What do we need salt for? What are we trying to balance out in our physiological system?
Action potential,
Right?
action potential, but yeah.
Well, not as much action potentials as we are our osmotic environment, okay, salt and water. Okay? Certainly they have some other effects as well, and we talked about that in the kidneys, but salt and water, we're looking out for the organisms. What did they, what do they put out there in the woods to try and track deer? The things called salt licks. So the deer are attracted if they're looking for things that affect their osmotic balances because they haven't been near water for a while or they haven't had enough salt. They will be attracted to the salt lick and the hunters will be up in the trees waiting. So osmotic balances, okay. What about sour? What does sour have? Has to do with our pH, okay? We're normally somewhere, we have a slightly acidic extracellular fluid, around 7.4, okay? So,
Alkaline, yeah.
7.4. Yeah, it's like, you could say it's either slightly acidic or slightly alkaline, because it's more than 7, the so-called number. But what we're talking about here, sour empties, okay? Or sour empties more alkaline, more than more acidic.
I would say alkaline, right? It's like an orange. I mean, I'm acidic. Acidic,
Yeah.
like an orange. So now you got these
Citric
messed
acid.
Like maybe in Spanish, they just say ácido as the word for sour.
What about bitter? Bitter is alkaline. Okay, bitter is alkaline. Most substances that are bitter are toxins. Okay? What's a bitter substance, though, that we seem to imbibe in large amounts? And that doesn't usually kill us. Coffee.
Yes, it's really dark chocolate. That's
Well,
the
kind of the same thing. Same variety of beans. Okay.
I like it. If I have it, it's going to be 100% straight.
Like this.
So right off the vine, right off the bush.
Actually, the cocoa fruit is really sweet. Like that, like, those fruits. It's very, good
Okay, here's the taste bud. Okay, so here's the taste board. Up here, that's where the substances are brought in. We have a synapse between the epithelial cell here. This is the taste itself. In the taste bud. And we have an afferent neuron here. And right here, we have a synapse, a serotonergic synapse. Between the taste itself and the afferent neuron. We also have sustanecular cells here that are here, this basal cell, which helps in the turnover of the epithelial cells of the taste bud. Okay, taste buds look like under the microscope, like little things. So, and the aqueous media that the taste in is being dissolved in is saliva. The other thing that you mentioned, okay, in saliva is salivary amylase for beginning the process of digestion. So, specific taste reactions. Okay. So the pastent is a stimulus. It can pass through ion channels. Examples of that are salt and sour. Actually, I mean, you could correlate that with other areas of the body, not necessarily cells in general, but renal cells in relationship to both hydrogen ions and sodium ions in particular. They can bind to or block ion channels. Another example is sour can do this, also bitter can do this. They can bind to and open ion channels, amino acids do this, okay? Is sodium saccharin, is that a true carbohydrate? What is it? It's an amino acid. Are these entities such as sodium saccharin, are they less sweet or more sweetish? Okay, they have a greater sweetness feature. That's what they put in all of these drinks to satisfy your quest for a sweet beverage. Okay? Yes, NutraSweet, you know, that things of that nature. Okay, or they can bind to the membrane receptors which activate a second messenger system. And we saw us in relationship to the nasal mucosa. Okay, so sweet, bitter, and umami. What does umami mean? It means delicious. Okay. What if you go into an Asian restaurant and you ask for these soybeans? What do we call them? Edamame. Okay. Everybody loves them. They're delicious. Not the same umami you're talking about. All right. So salty-based pastents there are specific sodium channels, which are, they're called amiloride sensitive sodium channels. Amiloride, if you remember, was a diuretic. So think about that. If somebody is on a amiloride diuretic or something like hypertension, it can block salty sensation.
Is that why oatmeal eat way too much salt?
But why do you think they do? Why do you think they have a tendency to go to foods that have a really enhanced taste, whether it's sugar or salt?
Their taste buds are too
Yeah, they don't have it. They've lost taste buds with age. They're trying to bring something into their mouth that they enjoy, that taste it. Okay, so anions such as sodium saccharin can alter saltiness, and lead to an increase in sweet sensation. Sour can be perceived as an aversive taste. I don't know if you realize that. I mean, were there things when you were kids that you wouldn't put in your mouth, no matter what mom said, no matter what dad said? They had like one parent had to hold your mouth open while the other parent was shoving it in. Certain types of vegetables, certain types of things. My daughter went from hot dogs to lobster.
Expensive change.
Yes.
Really?
Hot dog, peanut butter and jelly and hot dogs. That was her primary meal. Okay? And then as she got older, all of a sudden she got this taste for lobster. Every time, where do you want to go? I said, I want to go to fish restaurant. I want lobster. Okay, so whenever her birthday, okay, but some of these tastes, some of these sour sensations are aversive. I don't really like them because they are so sour, so acidic. This is a protein-induced type of receptor. It's directly related to the pH of the substance. Hydrogen ions can permeate through sodium channels and polarize receptor. Remember in the kidneys that sodium is this co-transporter of a lot of substances. Glucose, okay? Hydrogen ions in particular. Also plays a role movement bicarbonate. But this does specify also blocking potassium channels, so basically enhancing the depolarizing effect. Sweet, okay? Large number of syntases are sweet. This is typically a second messenger protein type system. G protein. This activates a second messenger called protein kinase A, okay? Or another entity inside of the cell itself is called N-acetyl triphosphamide, IP3. So causes an increase in cyclic AMP, which leads to release of internal calcium, which blocks selective potassium channels and stimulates transmitter release from this, or serotonin release from the taste bud cell. But it can also cause direct opening of cation channels. Bitterness, typically bitter substances, once again, are toxic substances. That's why, you're just thinking, why would we put all the bitter receptors in the posteriormost aspect of the oral cavity? What are we trying to prevent the organism from doing? From swallowing. A lot of bitter substances, you take a substance that's bitter, and you get gag reflexes, trying to get it out before you swallow. Okay? Things like that. Poisons are typically toxic. Okay? Once again, if you want to poison one of your colleagues, basically just saturate it in sugar. Okay? Because we'll eat anything sweet. Sometimes you get enough sugar to block the bitterness. It's kind of like life. So these can bind and block the potassium channels. For example, quinine. Quinine is a substance that sometimes we use in drink mixing, things like that. But this opens voltage-gated calcium channels. Or a second messenger system here. In relationship to a second messenger called T2R receptors, which activate a G protein called gustation. Gustation is the process of tasting. Okay, so this actually not an increase in AMP, this leads to a decrease in AMP via this enzyme phosphodiesterase. And this is more associated with the IP3 type second messenger in relationship to opening internal calcium channels.
How can we categorize spicy things if we don't have like?
You mean things that are high capsaicin, so to speak, so peppers?
Yeah, like very spicy. We don't have taste receptors for both are like glass.
You know what? In relationship to spicy things, it's kind of developing the ability to block noxious stimuli. Okay? Because spicy things can have as much an effect on taste buds, but it can have as much of an effect on pain receptors. Okay? What does capsaicin cause the release of? And it's in a lot of hot peppers. Any of you getting habanero peppers, things like that. It's like spice is measured in terms of scovilles. Okay, it's like a 200,000 scovilles. So if you're really into hot stuff, I used to cook a lot with hot peppers, and then I kind of did this once. We had my friends' parents over, and that we were kind of ready for that. But mostly being able to tolerate the noxious stimuli of the spice. Okay? Not just the fact that you enjoy that spice. I mean, because some spices are not terribly noxious, but they do have a little kick to them. You know that it's in that food. So, once again, IP3 here, and then umami, okay? Glutamate binds to cation channels, sodium or calcium channels. There are inotropic glutamate receptors which open in relationship to to things associated with the release of glutamate in a substance, and this open foliage gated calcium channels, okay? Now, is there any group that had a tendency to cook with a lot of glutamate?
It
Asian.
needs a lot of meat.
Huh?
It needs a lot of meat.
But Asian, what do they put in? MSG, monosodium glutamate. I've got close friends that they get on MSG, they like have a sneezing attack. They also have sneezing attacks, but they have a sneezing attack for 10 or 15 minutes if you can stop it, or it makes them sick. Okay? A lot of Asian, I think today's restaurants, if they do use monosodium glutamate in their preparation of the food, they do ask you to say, please don't use it, in the food, or they ask you if you use exclusively monosodium glutamate. What is monosodium glutamate used for? Why do they put it in food? Well, it may make it delicious, but it also keeps it around a lot longer. It's a preservative. All those candy bars that you're stuffing down there, coming out of the machine down there, they're loaded with monosodium glutamate. Just read the label. Just read the label. All right, so here's kind of an overview of these different sensory aspects. It's basically a visual. Here's salt up here, sour, hydrogen ion channels. Down here we have sweet sensation interpreted as being ice cream cone. Not all ice cream tastes that good, but and then here's bitter associated with coffee. This is one of the interesting things in these cells, in these bitter cells, is they have a very large internal sarcoplasmic reticulum, not sarcoplasmic, but endoplasmic reticulum. So instead of taking in this external calcium through the channels to stimulate the activity of the receptor, they release, the entity that enters in causes the release of internal calcium, which causes an increase in the channels, which causes an increase in the binding capabilities of these substances. The gustation pathway, taste is gustation. The solitary nucleus is the gustatory nucleus. The solitary nucleus is bigger than that. An older name for it was the nucleus tractus solitarius.
Can you go back to the last sentence?
So in relationship to that, it's a rather vertical nucleus located in the posterior aspect of the brainstem, down in the area of the pons medulla. Okay, so the upper portion of it is the gustatory nucleus. It receives input in relationship to taste sensation from 7, 9, and 10. Okay? The lower portion of it is a general visceral aberrant nucleus. Okay? Primarily from 9 and 10. Input from 9 and 10. Some people believe 7 as well. Okay, so this gets up to the thalamus via a tract that's alongside of the body of the pons and the midbrain. This is called the this tegmental tract, and this then from the tegmental tract here. Go back to that. From the tegmental tract to the ventral posterior medial nucleus. All sensations associated with the head, other than the sense of smell, go back to the ventral medial nucleus of the thalamus before they go to the cortex. Where did all of the rest of the sensations of the body go? Primarily general sensations. Where did they go? Which nucleus of the thalamus? Okay. Ventral posterior lateral.
So the head goes to,
Ventral posterior medial nucleus of the thalamus, and then to the cerebral cortex. post-central drivers, primary somatic-sensory cortex. The general sensations from the rest of the body to the ventral posterior lateral. Now remember, there are special sensations in the head. There are no special sensations anywhere else in the body. So VPL is only general sensory, only receiving general sensory input. VPM is receiving general sensory input, but also input in relationship to special sensations, especially things like taste and smell. Okay, Brodmann's area 43 is an area that is basically on the inferior-most aspect of the postcentral gyrus. This is the gustatory cortex.
Did you say that everything, all the solutions in it except for taste and smell go to the ventral cortex?
Except, everything except special sensations, taste, smell, vision, and so forth. There are no special sensations that come from the areas below the head. But special sensations are also collated with general sensations in relationship to the ventral posterior medial nucleus of the thoughts. The ventral posterior lateral is only general sensation. And here, this is just a nuclear map. Over here, here is the solitary nucleus. Okay, over here. Okay, this is the upper portion. So this is the gustatory nucleus. All right, just in about a minute and we'll finish. Forever. Disorders of taste. Okay. Taste is gustation. Loss of taste is agousia. Interesting term. Agousia can be due to cranial nerve lesions, obviously, at 7, 9, and 10. Okay, but smoking once again. So if you happen to be over the course of your life, or individuals over the course of your life, you get a chronic irritation from smoke, and the agents that are being released from cigarette smoking, cigar smoking, etc. And those cause epithelial changes in the tongue. On the tongue or the palate, it usually causes some type of hyperplastic reaction to the epithelium itself. They have, like a lot of smokers, they have what we would refer to as brown hairy tongue. Okay. With another entity, what do you see? Sometimes you see a hyperplastic areas on the lateral borders of the tongue associated with foliate pill, but it's not brown, it's white. What causes that? AIDS.
What is it?
White hairy AIDS.
On the side of the tongue?
Foliate pill. Okay. Dysgeusia or altered taste. Dryness. If your mouth is dry, it's very difficult to taste things. Okay, that's xerostomia. Zinc is an entity in any type of substance you bring in. It has an ability to alter or block your sensation of taste. Amitriptyline is an interesting drug. It was used early on, usually as an anti-anxiety medication, but it was also used in relationship to the treatment or early treatment for hypertension. Vincristine is a substance you don't see used much anymore. One of its primary uses years ago was a cancer therapeutic agent. It worked against cancer cells. Very powerful, but it also destroyed a lot of normal cells. Okay, gustatory auras may precede seizures. Okay, any of you have migraines? Okay. Do you ever get any kind of prequel to that migrainous event?
I just have like a chronic headache all the time, and then sometimes my vision will go blurry, and then I'll get a migraine.
Tone, seeing spots.
Yeah.
Okay, so in relationship to certain types of grand mal seizures, some individuals will have a altered taste sensation prior to the seizure coming on, so they'll know it's coming. Gustatory hallucinations, these are really kind of serious things. Gustatory hallucination are typically lesions of the temporal and parietal cortex. Encephalitis causes a lot of problems, but one of them is could be taste-related hallucinations. In other words, you're tasting something that isn't there. Okay. Psychoses, okay? Be careful of the people you hang out with. If they take something in their mouth and all of a sudden they become a little bit schizophrenic, it's not actually the person you walk into the bar with, you might want to get them. All right, so that's it. That's it for your, for the most part. We will continue on basically into more of your technique-oriented years. Although we have oral pathology ethics, second semester. Okay, pay attention. I guess that's what I say about this. To be able to recognize the tissue changes that are taking place in someone, whether it's their face or their or their scalp, and realize that there's something there that needs to be investigated further, either by a biopsy or some type of other further. All right, it's been fun. You may see me in the clinic, okay? Real meeting.